I don't tip because society says I have to. All right, I mean, I'll tip if somebody really deserves a tip. If they really put forth the effort, I'll give them something extra. But, I mean, it's tipping automatically. It's for the birds.
For fuck's sake.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to agree to a certain extent with Steve Buscemi from Reservoir Dogs giving the rundown on tipping. And that is the topic for today's show, today's episode of the FFS Talk podcast. Once again, featuring me, myself, and I. The guest chair is always available. If you are interested in joining the discussion, drop me an email, join@ffstalk.com. On with the show. I live in Las Vegas. The show is produced in Las Vegas. That has been true for not quite a decade. Well, the show is not a decade old. The language of gratitude in Las Vegas and elsewhere in the world is tipping. It has become something of an expectation. You could even say entitlement if you want to add a negative connotation. But at the end of the day, there are certain places where not only is it expected, but it is accounted for in the fact that an employee in the service industry can be paid below any established minimum wage because gratuities or tips are to be included. So the presumption is they will make more because of the customers, and so they can be paid less by their employer. And so I will start off by saying I tip. I do not follow the philosophy espoused by Mr. Buscemi, his character anyway. So the notion of tipping, by way of example, this is not a humble brag, but this is illustrating the fact that I was in Ireland at 37 Dawson. I was, at that point, something of a regular, having visited Ireland many times for work. Visited 37 many times, not for work. It's a fine establishment. And and it actually wasn't even a bartender from there. He worked at a different bar. It was day drinking, day pints. And they were about to show me this other bar where he worked, and they had a nice whiskey collection, so we were going to wander over there. So I was paying my tab, and he said, in my not quite realistic Irish accent, he said, "Dan, I know you're from Vegas, but you don't have to tip like it. We pay our bar people a proper wage." I don't think he said bar people, whatever he did say. It wasn't barman. I think there was might have been barman, but there were men and women working behind the bar, so it's hard to say. But either way, I was chastised somewhat for leaving something like 10 euros on top of a couple of pints. And so there you go. In here in Las Vegas, there was never a question about, having a fun evening, buying rounds, tipping, buying rounds for the bartenders, all that stuff. So it's part of the fun, I suppose. So that's the context from which my comments will be made. I like to think that I have a certain analytical mindset sometimes. So let's tear apart tipping in America. In other places, it's different. So we'll keep it to America. And remember, I'm looking through the Las Vegas lens. And before we even go down this path, the history of tipping is controversial. You may have heard different versions of various stories about being able to pay a lower wage or perhaps a no wage employee, possibly racially motivated, possibly after Prohibition. Tipping allegedly began in the 1700s in Britain, in taverns, to sort of bribe the bar staff to, give me my pint before you give them theirs, that kind of thing. So encouraging, what is it, to ensure promptitude, I think it was. maybe these things are true, maybe they are not. They are subject to debate, and that's not for this episode today. So let's start where we are. We are in a place where, well, let's start from 2019. We're in a place where some states, I think it's down to state-based. I remember when I was in Arizona, Arizona was at least at that point. I haven't actually checked. I'm not going to check every state. So you check your state, ponder. Below minimum wage for employees, tipping. What is it? Tip eligible employees. So if you worked in a restaurant, bar, service industry, you did not have to make minimum wage. And this is as an employee, and that distinction will be important when we propose a way around this. So the premise here is that what does not work is the current system of splitting a wage for an employee of a restaurant, bar, or other similar job, splitting the wage between the employer, who may or may not have to pay some minimum wage as if the person was not making a tip or gratuities, and then rely on the customer to make up the difference or to go above and beyond. That's always the goal, right? So some places, they will pay some minimum wage. Sometimes it's a split minimum wage, right? With tips, without tips. Sometimes with tips, wage is well below the minimum wage without tips. And sometimes they're reasonably close. It varies. That's why I don't want to be this is not a comprehensive rundown on those policies. But the take home is that an employee, if there is a minimum wage to be paid by the employee is entitled to that minimum wage without the presumption that there will be tipping, unless there's a commission involved. And that's what we'll get to. So, fun fact, in some states, California, for example, where Silicon Valley was, maybe still is, depending on how you look at working from home. I believe I was at salon.com. The only time I ever worked at a .com. And I found out I was putting in like 12-hour days for no good reason. And I found out that there was some minimum wage regulation that had passed that applied to exempt employees. So that is, if you were not paid hourly, but an exempt employee, that means you're exempt from overtime, basically. But you had to be making at least a minimum wage. So that is, you took your annual salary, and you divided it by the number of hours worked. And the premise was too many people were being taken advantage of with the promise, for example, of incentive stock option payout. And so they were given a low startup wage. I don't know what low was at the time. I can't remember, but it was, a low dollar, if not six figures. Let's put it that way. And then you'd get some stock options, or maybe you wouldn't. And so as an employee, you were not making overtime, so you could work 24/7 every single day, and you got your paycheck, and it was not different. And you were not on commission typically. Certainly a member of technical staff was not getting commission. A smaller company like Salon didn't have bonus programs or performance bonuses or things like this. So at the end of the day, if I took my paycheck divided by the number of hours actually worked, it was falling below minimum wage, which is sort of crazy. In order to correct that, you had to file a complaint. And probably once that became apparent, there was a little disincentive to do that, because you don't want to be the person who files complaints and gets damages from payroll for working too much. This was Silicon Valley, after all. You're supposed to get rich on stock options, not by filing complaints. So, and there's probably something to be said about the culture as it has evolved, but that's another story. So, when you were working an exempt role in California, and from what I understand, the minimum wage rule law in California as of January 1st, 2021 goes back to that, because they did rescind that for a while. And that's where my delving into California labor laws will come to an end. But I really checked to see if anything like that law had returned, and it looks like it has. And so if you are an exempt employee in California and you are not making some base weekly pay when you account for hours worked, then, well, there's a problem, and that's where we'll leave that. So that the notion of paying someone some amount of money for work is not a foreign notion. You know, California has always been sort of pro-employee from some perspectives. They have very strict rules about employer handling of tips, for example. Tip pooling, all that, very explicitly spelled out in their labor codes. Kind of strange when you think about it, but let's not. So, employer in an exempt, non-gratuity scenario pays employee a certain amount of money. Okay, that's fine. So now, and it doesn't matter who my customer is, right? I'm getting paid, barring commissions, and I could be in sales, and I might have a commission. I could be in marketing, and I get some sort of a marketing performance bonus. I could be in engineering, and I get some sort of a company bonus. Intel used to do this, right? So end of the year, you get some sort of bizarro scoring scheme that they had, and you end up with extra money, and yay, wonderful. If you are leaving some of your employee pay to the customer, then who knows what's going to happen. And so traditionally, the front of house, the host or hostess, the wait staff, the bartender, the cocktail staff, the busing staff, any other staff, there could be, well, I guess the wait staff. Well, I mean, that's pretty much everybody at the front of house, the people that you see, not the back, not the kitchen. Dishwasher, kitchen, chef, sous chef. These are people that do not participate in the tip pool, so they normally will make a little bit more money, but do not participate in the tip pooling. The front of house typically will participate in a tip pool, or if they are not tip pooling, the person who collects the tips is expected to tip out. That means you get your and it's been a while for me, so I'm going from memory, and I'm assuming that it's pretty much like this, but if I am working my section, I have a table, maybe I have a party of 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever. So there's some minimum gratuity. And by the way, your state may vary, but that gratuity doesn't necessarily go to if it's mandatory, if it's automatically attached, you may think you are giving an extra 15% to the server and the staff, the wait staff, and but no, in some places, I believe in California, for example, a gratuity that is compulsory, that is not voluntary, is not automatically assigned to the wait staff. In that case, the restaurant or the place of business, if it's not a restaurant, is entitled to manage and disperse that gratuity amount. I'm not an attorney. I'm going from memory here, but the fact is, it's not always completely obvious. And not only is it not obvious where your gratuity money is going, or tip, voluntary tip, compulsory gratuity, it's not always obvious what is happening in the place of business. I've added a link to the show notes, an NPR article about how restaurant wait staff, well, staff in general, are frustrated. There have been stories about fast food restaurant workers walking off en masse, quitting, shutting down. Here in Las Vegas, a city that is built on the service industry, hospitality, service, gratuities. They can't hire people. They can't hire people on the strip. They can't hire what they would consider to be well-paying positions that require a certain amount of qualification and credentials, sheriff card, anything you need to serve alcohol, to work around gaming machines, to serve food, to prepare food. So you can't just hire a high school kid, age requirements, sheriff, fingerprinting, whatever's needed. And then you're working on the strip. So you're going to be, as of Friday the 30th of July, mask up. So you're, hopefully you're vaccinated. As we do this, I forgot to mention it's July 27th as we're recording the show. So it's, and I mentioned, considering 2019. Well, then when you move into 2020, pardon me, suddenly people are not eating in restaurants. They are, various places with various rules. So some are locked down, some are limited capacity. The takeout business, which is hacking out a whole chunk of change, 20% commissions or more, 30%, whatever it was. And then the driver is expecting a tip. And that was a problem. Many drivers were frustrated that they were not getting tipped because food delivery companies were not making money, or they were making money, but they weren't sharing it. I think it wasn't Grubhub. It was DoorDash. DoorDash had a tip problem wherein they were retaining the tips and not sharing in some places, at least. So it's sort of ugly when the customer is involved in paying for the service, but the employer is also paying and then somehow ends up controlling the flow of that money, of the intended gratuity tip money, and what the customer expectation is, and then what the final results are, and then who finds out, right? So what we are seeing today, and arguably as a result of the light bulb finally coming on, is being underpaid and relying on customers doesn't work when the customers have no sort of intimate knowledge of the challenges and the frustrations and the challenges is a good word, but the environment in which our service industry folks are working is not normal. It's not like it used to be. It's not like the good old days a year and a half ago. Different mask requirements, different occupancy caps, different attitudes from customers, especially when there have been requests to wear a mask or not, distancing, social distancing pods or tents, or these outdoor seating, various attempts by restaurant owners or business owners. If it's not a restaurant, bar, other, maybe it's a hair salon, maybe it's other businesses where customer tipping is part of the economy. So if you have no idea, if you're a customer, if I were to walk into some of my regular spots here in Las Vegas, which I haven't in a long time, I might actually ask, how are things? What's going on? And they might actually tell me if I know, if I'm speaking to someone I've known for 8 years, right? But if the customers are not completely aware of that, on top of what's happening, do they understand the implications of a retaliatory, I guess a negative tip? Is that possible? We've seen anecdotally, people leave a note, I didn't want to wear a mask, and you complain, so they editorialize on the receipt, pictures get posted, it turns into a frustrating back and forth and so on. It makes the news, which is ridiculous. So when you're leaving, as an employer, you're leaving the customer experience to a person or a staff. I'm not berating the staff. This is the state of affairs. You're leaving the customer experience in the hands of people who are not always doing well for a variety of reasons. 2020. We'll use that as the bar at this moment, right? The bar went a little bit low, or maybe the bar to be doing well has gone up, I guess. But employees that are not making a lot of money, or who are frustrated, who are concerned about their personal health, who have issues with childcare because schools were not open. The list goes on. There's all kinds of things happening. And so when they are not being paid sufficiently, relying on customers who have no idea what their situation is, any frustration that impacts their take-home tips can be quite painful. So who wants to be in that situation? Leaving not only the customer experience, but the employee financial security in completely contradictory hands. Is that a good word? So employer has no control over that customer experience, not no control, but they're at a distance, and customer without insight is left to either follow the expected minimums or insult, berate, and frustrate their server, the wait staff, and from there cascades, right? It's nothing good comes of that type of interaction. Now, if you are if you work in a salon, if you work in your own business, right? So if I'm not mistaken, there are scenarios where if I'm a barber or a hairstylist or a color or nails, manicure, pedicure, whatever, maybe I rent the station, maybe I pay some fee and possibly a revenue share, and my clients will find me, right, so that I'm doing the work. And by the way, employees in restaurants also do some of that same work, right? They're promoting, they're posting on social media, they're posting photos, they're interacting with customers, they have their regulars, that will follow them to another restaurant or bar. So the value proposition for the employer is my employees and that customer experience are tied together, and they have tangible, measurable value, right? So as a free agent, if I'm renting a chair or a station, and I'm keeping it simple, there are probably many other types of businesses. Maybe you're a car detailer and you rent the equipment and you go to a client and you detail their car, and if they give you a tip, you get to keep the tip, and then you pay some. So generally it's there'll be a base. Maybe it's per client, maybe it's for the day you're renting the equipment or the station or whatever. So you're using the facility, equipment, etc. And then maybe there's a revenue share component. So I've paid my flat fee for my station at the salon. My clients come in. I have a certain number of clients. They pay the advertised price, and then they tip out. They tip me. They don't tip out. But then does the free agent, does the stylist or I don't know who does nails, the manicurist, do they take the tip money and take the revenue share and give it to the business owner, the proprietor, right? So if I charge $35 for service and then I get a $10 tip, do I take the revenue share percentage of $45 or is it of $35, et cetera, et cetera? So there's that. The premise of tipping, I believe there was a Starbucks case which was eventually overturned. There's an argument to be made, however, and this is where we'll get to Uber and Lyft and gig employees. Gig employees versus contractors or free agents, right? So the Starbucks case, which I will try to get a link to that too in the show notes, but since it was overturned, this is only anecdotal, was the shift manager, the store manager at a Starbucks somewhere was participating in the tip pool. But the premise of the labor code at the time was that only hourly employees or non-exempt, non-salary, non-managerial, non-owner participants would have tip pool participation, right? So if there were 3 employees working hourly and a shift manager, do we split the tips 3 ways or 4 ways? And there was a lawsuit brought because I believe it was at Starbucks. There was the tips were being split 4 ways instead of 3. And initially they found the take home was, if I'm a customer and the store manager has prepared my beverage, prepared my food item, asked me how my day was going, took the payment, have a nice day, here's your stuff, right? So they've done exactly the same thing as any other employee would do. If I give a tip, me as a customer, I am under the impression that the manager was just the same as any other employee. So I'm giving the tip for the services rendered for the customer experience, not concerning myself with, you're a salary employee, you're management, maybe you're the owner, right? So the customer's mindset when they provide that tip, when they put the money in the jar, bowl, container, or whatever, or they write it on the receipt, their intent is based on that customer experience, not on the role of the person. Okay. So, and I'll try to see if that was overturned, but the premise is reasonable. Because remember, in some cases, the person that's getting tips is not being paid the minimum wage that a person in a non-gratuity role might be getting, right? You could conceivably go to a fast food restaurant, Burger King, McDonald's, Wendy's, etc. If I'm not mistaken, they generally have a no tipping policy. So front of house, back of house, you're not getting tipped. You're getting your normal wage, and that's it. So you could go get your Big Mac and your filet of fish, quarter pounder, French fries, icy Coke, maybe a thick shake, sundae and apple pie at the end. It's a big bag they're going to give you. But when you do that, you pay the total, and that's it. There's no other expectation. And then later, when you go to get a coffee at a Starbucks, there is an expectation. Now, they don't, I believe it's company policy, they don't ask for it. They don't give you a hard time, but the tip jar is usually there, right? So you can give a tip for the person doing essentially the same exact thing that the people at McDonald's or Burger King or the other restaurant, fast food restaurant did, right? They've taken your order. They've provided you with a positive customer experience. They've delivered the items you asked for. They take your money, tell you to have a nice day, and you're on with your day. So what is it about the fast food person doing their job and the Starbucks employee or the coffee shop employee doing their job? One is entitled to tips and one is not. Well, that is a good question. Think about that. So the one of the things to consider is the company policy, obviously. And then something else to consider is the employee-employer relationship. And so in the case of McDonald's, having worked at McDonald's, I'll tell you, you're just a normal employee. You get your minimum wage or whatever the situation is in that particular locality. And that's about it. And if you are at a managerial level in McDonald's culture, you've done your time. Maybe you're getting a reasonable, I've seen some people that they punch in and punch out, but they don't actually take lunch breaks. so they're not punching in and out for breaks or anything. I've seen exempt employees, store owners. So there's different scenarios, even in your local neighborhood McDonald's. Coffee shop could be independent, could be Starbucks, could be different policies, could be that tip pooling like I was referring to. And then you look at, like I said, the salon or the free agency. Is this person an employee? Are they a contractor? Are they external, right? So then you get to the Lyft Uber question. Are these people employees of Lyft and Uber? Are they free agents, right? Are they getting 1099? That's really the take home. Are they getting a W-2 or a 1099? And the theory would be, and this is what I personally advocate for, and if you want to argue with me, come on over. If you are a W-2 employee, okay, if we're going to keep tipping, and by the way, you cannot simply wake up tomorrow and turn off tipping. The tipping economy would have to be transitioned into the proposal that I will get to shortly. So step one, if you are a W-2 employee, you get your tips. If you are an exempt employee and you are working in a role that does not appear similar or identical to the W-2 employees, that's the store manager versus store employee staff scenario from the Starbucks situation. Something like that, and I'll give another example that's closer to my own recent experience. You have a food truck or a food vendor, mobile vendor at an event. The owner is on the truck or in the tent, in the booth, at the cart. And they have an employee working for them. The tips go to the employee, not to the owner. Even though the owner is, see, this is where it gets tricky. The owner is a special case. If there's a manager on the vehicle, on the mobile vending platform, that's maybe subject to debate. But the owner is getting the profits of the venture. There is no need for the owner to participate in a tip pool, tip sharing. If the owner is working on a truck or in a tent by themselves, technically there's really no reason to give that person a tip. Why? Because if you're tipping 10%, 15%, 20% on some total, maybe they've prepared food. And I'm not talking about retail. That's a whole different headache. So many special cases. If you are watching the owner prepare your delightful victuals at a farmer's market, a foodie fest, you hand them money. They pay their overhead. They pay whatever fees they had to pay for at the event, the revenue share. Just like the person in the salon, right? They're a free agent. They brought their business to this event, just like somebody might bring their shears and clippers and aprons and whatever. They've brought their business to this event. They're paying a revenue share to conduct this business and to enable the business to the event. And after all is said and done, whatever's left, they keep. This is not true of a W-2 employee at a restaurant or a bar or something. They do not participate in the revenue stream of the business, and that is why tipping has become the way to pay the employees. Right? So the proposal then is if you are a W-2 employee of a business, you are entitled to the tips. However, moving forward, the transition, do away with tipping for employees. If you work at a company, your wages come from the employer. So what does not work is this splitting responsibility for paying a person for their work between an employer who is possibly not making enough money to stay in business and so is underpaying his employees, relying on customers to make up the difference. And the customer has no idea other than there's some cultural standard of 20%, and they don't want to get maligned on social media and whatever other crises are looming in the event that they are considered a bad tipper. So remove that from the equation. An employee, a W-2 employee at a restaurant or a bar or any place of business where you are engaging with customers, you do not have a tip jar. You do not have tipping. You have commission sales. There you go. I said it. So now, and everyone that works at the company participates in the commission structure. The exact percentage might vary. That's it's sort of like salaries at companies. That's a point of negotiation, right? So you may have to adjust the commission based on. And the nice thing about commission is that the commission is it slides with your customer volume, right? Your sales volume. So if you don't have any customers and no sales, then there's no commissions. That's not great, but the fact is, in the case of the lockdowns during pandemics, if the restaurant was able to generate sales, they could still have a commission structure based on those sales. And it would actually, I know there was a restaurant here in Vegas that Esther's Kitchen, he was having his employees do deliveries. And there's a question about safety and social distance and all that, insurance for vehicles. But the take home, the employees are still participating in the business. So rather than giving a percentage to DoorDash or Grubhub or Uber, your employees are still enabling the business. So you're all participating in its success. You're entitled to a commission on the resulting sales, right? So rather than relying on tipping from customers who may have their own problems, right? That was going around. And instead of saying, if you don't have money to tip, stay home, right? There's this very adversarial attitude. And let's also consider this. And this gets a little bit complicated if you are not familiar with the exciting world of tip-based service industry. If you go to a restaurant, or if I go to a restaurant, we sit or stand. We place an order for whatever, our meal, beverage, and in the course of our enjoyment, the person who was providing our service says, "I have to leave now." So they usually will introduce the person taking their shift or whatever, and okay, I'm going to go. Now, when you tip, when I leave my delightful, nice size tip, so that I get positive reviews in the service industry circles. So I leave a nice tip and I thank you, and tell so and so thanks, all that. A nice experience. I leave. So now, the tip and the total, they're all there for everyone to see. The person that took the shift over, maybe all they did was take the money, or maybe they brought dessert, or maybe so there's kind of an understanding, like, yeah, okay, I'll keep a quarter, or whatever the split is. That's fine. That's beyond the scope of this. But the fact is, we have now introduced a fractional window of tip sharing that may vary per. Maybe I was there for 2 hours with my party. Maybe me and 2 other people or something, and then maybe a table of 6 just sat down, and they just put their order in, and then the shift change. So in my case, it's a 80-20. And in this other table's case, it's a 20-80, but plus they got the added gratuity, right? So things can get complicated. They can get a little nutty. And nobody really does this accounting. Nobody's got their spreadsheet out on their phone or on their computer. So it's all kind of like, okay, well, I tipped out and you get this, and there's an envelope that you'll find in your locker. That was an Amazon smart speaker chiming in. I always forget to mute that. So the tipping scheme becomes more complicated when you consider that the tipping window is supposed to align with a shift, plus or minus, and it can get complicated. It can be a question of fairness. It can be a question of, hey, did so and so keep a little extra, give a little bit more, give a little bit less. So, and we're still stuck on the employee notion, right? So, as employees of a business, if you are engaging with customers or enabling that engagement, so you're in the front of the house or the back of the house, everyone is participating in the success of the business. Everyone's participation means customer experiences are positive. Customers come back. They know what they're going to pay ahead of time. There is no question about the prices are this. I don't have that much money for whatever reason, so I'm not going to go there. Not, I can pay the menu price or I can pay whatever the total is, but then not tip and make somebody upset. Right, so the customer knows what they're going to pay when they go. There's a commission structure built in. It's not compulsory tipping now. It is commission sales. That's a known. Everybody does that. Go buy a car sometime. That's how that works, right? In fact, it's a multi-level commissions scheme. That's another story. So employees need to get off the tip, get onto the commission. It's just that simple. There's really no reason, because if everybody's successful, everybody, anytime that you tweet, that's old school, Insta, TikTok, whatever, anytime someone is, come see me at the bar, come see me at the restaurant, hey, I'm working tomorrow. And this goes for anyone who's promoting their own engagement. And we got this with food trucks all the time. Hey, come and see us at this car dealership, at a Saturday event, at a farmer's market. So the person that's doing the work at the event or at the restaurant, and I'm leaving out the kitchen staff and all that, but they're working, and they're also working outside of the business to promote the business, right? So that's often sort of a free, kind of in the noise. If you are connecting the employee compensation, or if you are assuming that you're free agents in the case of mobile vendors, or Uber and Lyft, or any gig workers, if you're assuming that anything that they do extracurricularly to promote the business, to handing out business cards, where if you are as an employer or as a broker of services, Uber and Lyft, if you are benefiting from their efforts outside of the pay window, the hourly or whatever, however your pay structure is, that's sometimes not accounted for, often not accounted for. So if commission sales for the employees, and I'm still going to get to the free agency. So employees, if you are on commission, not on tips, any work you do to bring more customers to the establishment, to promote a positive customer experience, a positive impression, good reviews, etc., well, that will show up in your commission. And your commission will, ideally, will be based not strictly on when you are working, right? So a successful restaurant becomes successful because the customer you had yesterday returns today or tomorrow. And you may not be there, but there is the lingering effect. I think Gary Vaynerchuk says, after the third visit, you have a regular, right? So if you've participated in adding another regular to a venue, then why should you only be entitled to the tip they left or the fraction of the tip they left one time when it was because of your participation in their customer experience that they have returned, right? So if a commission structure is in place, then everybody wins because everybody is on the same team. And finally, without accusing people too much, I will simply say that I know for a fact that when you are tipping, if you see the items are not on your bill, what's the rule? You tip on what the total would have been. And that's the minimum. You may completely replace the cost of the item. So if there was a $10 item that, gratis under whatever the circumstances, do you tip $2 on that, or do you tip $10, $12? Right, I've done all of those myself. Your mileage may vary. So when you are presented with that situation, the tip goes up. Now, what were the terms of that gratis item? Was that an employee comp? Was that in the comp budget? Was that accounted for somewhere? Was that just deleted? I've seen all of those things happen. So commission sales mean encouraging people to have a good time, to return, to spend a predictable amount of money, and make everyone have a good experience. When you leave it to tipping, you run the risk of doing whatever needs to be done to get more tips. So we'll just leave that there. So yes, commission to employees, and everybody wins. And it doesn't have to be just a restaurant business. It can be any business, because commission sales is already a thing. I'm not inventing anything new. Now, free agency. Mobile vendors, like I said, salon, car detailing, anything where you are, and arguably Lyft, Uber, and other gig workers, maybe DoorDash and Grubhub delivery people. If you are not an employee, if you are a free agent, you are getting a 1099, you're getting some sort of a fee to deliver, you get to keep your tips. Your tips are your money. If there's a revenue share component, the tips are not a part of the rev share. Tips are tips, they're not revenue. If you are on a food truck and your tips are going into a tip jar, they should go to the employee, because this might sound complicated. The free agent is the food truck. I hope everybody has been to a food truck before. If not, you should go to one. And I'm not leaving out mobile vendors. I'm just specifying an example. So you have owner and employee on a food truck. The owner is paying a revenue share and the overhead of the business, but is keeping the profit. The employee is getting paid some sort of a wage. Ideally, they would be paid commission. But if there are tips left, then the tips should not be accounted with the revenue share, and they would go to the employee or employees, and that's it. Keep it simple. Same at the hair salon. If there's $35 for the haircut, $50 for the coloring, whatever. I don't know what the prices are nowadays. If I want to tip somebody $100, that does not go to the hair salon. That goes to the person that did the work. The hair salon has set their price. They have their overhead. They have their fee structure. And the person working is not an employee. But if they've given somebody a good experience, then the hair salon wants to host that person. So why take their money? You want that free agent to come back, because they're going to draw more customers, and that's more free advertising, free, quote unquote. So this is certainly worthy of a serious discussion, and it would be very interesting to speak to a service industry employee, free agent, as I've described. Perhaps you can correct my assumptions and simplified description of those arrangements and scenarios. And a business owner or owners. There are some businesses in here in Las Vegas that shy away from tipping in the normal bar or restaurant scenario, right? So that where a tip would normally be, I don't remember who it was. That is escaping me at the moment. But it's not common. The language of gratitude in Las Vegas and so many other places, but most definitely in Las Vegas. The language of gratitude to the housekeeping staff at the resort you're staying at, to the concierge, to the bellhop, to the bar staff, to the restaurant staff, to the Uber driver, to the everybody is looking for a VIG, because the service industry is assumed to be gratuity based, not wage based, and it's a travesty. And that is the part that is not working. And the proposal to make it work better is more commission, more extension of net wage benefit across shifts and across a general, employee relationship with an employer, so that the customer is not a part of the wage loop. They are part of the experience provided by the employer through the employee. And as far as free agency, it should always be clear to a customer. Now, there was a circumstance in a hotel one time where a mess was made above and beyond, right? In that case, that's a special consideration, and that's where things start to get complicated. If you are asking somebody to go, the example I gave earlier, so we'll say a housekeeping staff, McDonald's employee, Starbucks employee, these are people that are doing their jobs and they should be in the commission structure that I've proposed. But what happens if they got to go above and beyond, right? Maybe you help someone out to their car. Maybe they spilled a bunch of stuff and you help them, their bag dumped out, and you help them clean up. And they say, hey, here, thanks for helping. Here's $5. Here's $10. Here's $100. Here's $1 million. Whatever. Winning a lottery ticket. That's been done. Those are special cases. The person that did that effort, right? Do I put that in the tip pool? No. The customer intention is to thank you, the language of gratitude, with a tip for something you did or did not do, helped or didn't help, whatever. But the general day-to-day compensation of employees should be commission-based, and compensation of non-employees should be very obvious. If you go get your haircut, the person sitting there, you should be able to say, do you work here, or are you, oh no, I'm a free agent. I pay for the chair, the station. They get a percentage. I keep the rest. Oh, so if I give you this tip, it goes into your pocket. Yes. Okay. Right. So a clear understanding of what the transaction is that the customer is participating in. If they are expressing gratitude in the form of compensation, it should be very clear to whom that is going. And so tip pooling really should be a special case. The compulsory gratuity for large parties, maybe that should be a part of the commission, because really, when you think about it, a large party usually needs more than one or two people. The kitchen staff is working extra hard to get all the plates out at the same time. It's bigger than just 15% extra. This is a complicated topic, but I believe this simple solution is one that's already working. It's to pay people a living wage and encourage them to participate in success on behalf of the business and their role, rather than foisting that onto customers who are not a part of the business. They're a part of the business because they are getting services from the business, but they have no idea how your business operates. They have no idea what the employees need, want, desire. They are there to have a hamburger and a coffee and to go back to work or whatever, right? So set expectations for pricing, commission sales. Everybody wins. Get rid of tipping. That's the solution. That's the proposal. And hopefully by now you are eager to participate in a discussion about this and similar economic issues, because the state of the economy, the entire not quite accurate notion that people making augmented unemployment monies are being too well paid to go back to work. These are the sorts of things where if the payment structure in some of the jobs that we often forget and ignore, and like I said, I included housekeeping, concierge bell service. I'm thinking clearly in the Las Vegas resort scene, but wherever you are, there are certainly people who are not being paid well. They're not being paid for their work, and if their employer is relying on gratuities and tips to make up the difference, and you don't know that, and nobody wins. It's about time. And as a software engineer, like I said, I was entitled to make a certain wage by law. And when you start realizing that you're working a lot harder than you thought you would be, and you look at your pay envelope and it's, plus tips if you got them, and you find it lacking, that's just not good for anybody. So the take home is what works is paying people correct, right? Treating people well and allowing them to participate in our economy, because, hey, guess what? If people have money, they spend it. I know that's crazy. They don't always spend it on space flight. Sometimes they just pay rent and pay for food, and then they go out and patronize businesses, especially local businesses. So really nothing bad about that. What's not working is allowing customers and people who have no idea what they're participating in to be a part of the wage infrastructure for the people that make it go. And anyone who ate anything during the pandemic lockdowns of 2020, if you went to a grocery store, or if you just went anywhere, if you had food delivered, if you went here in Nevada, they were doing alcohol deliveries and pickups. And these were people that were not being paid as well as they should have been. So that is the solution. That is the proposal, anyway. So come on down. You tell me what you think. You come on the show. We'll do an episode where you rebut, or you offer your version. You tell me I'm completely wrong. Come on down. Join, as in join the discussion. Join at ffstalk.com. You can follow me on Twitter, ffstalk.com on Twitter. There are show notes via Substack. There's a Weekender via review. Those are going to eventually transition to our website, ffstalk.com. If you are listening to this via Anchor, that will not go away, but self-hosting of these things is in the offing. I'm just waiting for my tips, and then we'll get this going. You should be paid for doing your job. That's the take home. And if you do it well and everybody ends up winning, you should get some commission. I will say that when I worked at Intel, the most recent employer for my services as a W-2 employee, getting I think it was quarterly bonus that was reflecting how the particular group did, or whatever it was based on. There was some wacky math. That was nice, right? It says, putting in these hours, doing the extra effort. I stopped off on the way from OSCON or OSCON in Oregon. I was on the way back to Las Vegas, and I stopped in Mountain View, California to meet with a certain search company that's based there to talk about, because I was the only one available, to talk about a product that our group was working on that they wanted to use. So I had a 1 hour conversation. I ended up stopping in at the Intel headquarters, met with my people in my group there, continued on home the next day or two. And at the end of the quarter, I got credit for the sales exchange that took place, right? Because I participated in that, right? So I was an active participant in a successful customer engagement, and I got a financial benefit from that, why do we not extend that to anybody who is making our businesses go, our lives easier, etc.? So I will stop pontificating there. Come on down. Tell me what you think. Reach out. Come on the show. As we do more live streaming eventually, I would love to do this in a more interactive way. So let's go. Bring it on. Check the show notes. Remember, you can always buy me a coffee. That's my tip jar, if you will. There's no obligation, but there's links to everything on my buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo profile page. And there's just more and more stuff coming. So that's my sort of central hub place to figure out what's going on. Come on down, participate, and tell me what you think. For feck's sake, thank you.